Hey everybody, it's your boy, Jesus Christ Jr. here. And you know, it's been a minute since I made anything for this channel. I've been making stuff other places. You can check some of that stuff out where there's a link. Maybe it'll be in the description, it'll be around here, I don't know. I've been making stuff, I just haven't really been making stuff for this, which is why I'm making this video, as you can see from the title, you know, what it is. I just haven't really done this in a while, so bear with me. But you know, I think that calls for something a little more opulent. You know, I don't want to dress it up a little bit, huh? What are these guys going? Get some microphone, huh? Just put it on right there, huh? Ooh, hey, you, come here. No, come here. No, closer. Come here. No, come here. That's way too close. You want to talk about video games? Jesus Christ, I look like I'm about to start talking about politics or something. Don't worry, I would never become a politics YouTuber. No, seriously, I wouldn't do that. Woo! Let's talk about video games. Specifically, I want to talk about video games that came out this year, the year of our Lord, 2018. Because I don't think I've really done that at all this year, which is kind of wild. It's been kind of a strange year for me and video games, which I will get into. But yeah, it's just like, I haven't really been, I've been thinking about them. I just haven't really had the urge to get in front of a camera and talk about them. Like that's like a super lie, actually. I've written like quite a few videos that I just never made. Like I wrote like half the script and I was like, fuck it, I don't wanna. So, without further ado, these are the games I want to talk about from 2018 in the order that I want to talk about them, but more often than not, sorted by order of their release. I wouldn't say that this is really like a game of the year type thing, though I will talk about like some of the stuff that you've seen people talking about in game of the year conversations. I just really wanted to like go over the stuff from this year that I thought was cool or special or unique or worth mentioning at the very least, worth having a discussion about, or anything that I had words to say about. And I put on this fucking stupid thing. I thought this would be a good bit, but it's just not that great of a bit. First up is Celeste. It's a 2D side-scrolling platformer that's super tight with great controls and even better level design, you know, really akin to something like Super Meat Boy, which is one of my favorite games of all time. But wrapped up in that is also like this super really well-written and heartfelt story about depression and anxiety and what it means to get over that sort of stuff. You know, like the character is literally like climbing a mountain and trying to reach the top of this mountain. It's like the greatest struggle a human body can endure, right? But it's wrapped up in this thing about the greatest struggle a human mind could endure. Oh, wow. Look at that. Made a little thing there. And on top of that, it's just like super fun and awesome to play. And it's got some of the greatest like hidden levels stuff I've seen in video games in a long time. Secondly is Dragon Ball Fighter Z. You might want to call it Fighters, but I believe the actual pronunciation of that is Fighter Z. I'm not a huge fighting game guy. In fact, I'm pretty bad at most fighting games. I think the only fighting game that I can really like hold my own in is like Smash or like Mortal Kombat, but Mortal Kombat's for like babies and Smash isn't a real fighting game. Dragon Ball like held a lot of like pop culture zeitgeist this year. Like Goku was even in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade just a couple weeks ago. You know, just because of like Super coming out and reaching its ending and that movie is on its way and stuff like that. So it was the perfect storm. Like everyone was talking about Dragon Ball, and then Arc Sys is like, hey, what if we made one of our really good fighting games that everybody loves, but with Dragon Ball? And that's exactly what it is. So it's a good Dragon Ball game if you're a fan of Dragon Ball, and it's a fantastic fighting game from what I've seen if you are a fighting game guy. Like it even beat out like Street Fighter at EVO, which is fucking wild. Third is Monster Hunter World. I'm gonna stop numbering these because, this goes for a little bit, you know. I don't have a lot to say about all this stuff, but I do have stuff to say about most of it. You know, Monster Hunter World is a like a lot of Monster Hunter people will say that it's like this sort of like dumbed down version of a series they love, which I guess it is, and I really love Monster Hunter personally, but I think it's definitely my favorite version. Like the stuff they've taken out or that they've done down, in my opinion, is like so negligible compared to like what we get here. It is like obviously the most beautiful game. It's running on like modern hardware as opposed to like a 3DS, and it just makes a lot of quality of life improvements that every sane person wants, and I think it's a really great game. But the console versions which came out earlier in the year were whatever. I mean, unless you had like the newer consoles, they didn't run at 60. It was just a whole thing, and so I didn't really get too much into it on consoles. So, Florence came out this year on phones. This is the only mobile game that I'm going to talk about in this video. Florence is a couple bucks, maybe $7 at the most, but it's kind of like a sad story that you play through with WarioWare minigames. And that's really all I can say about it. I want you to go play it. It's really fantastic. It's really well done. The art is beautiful. It's done by this developer house out in Australia. I can't think of the name of them right now, but it's really fantastic. That is one of the games that I still am thinking about at the end of this year. It's like a 40-minute long mobile game that costs a couple bucks, and I'm still thinking about it. And I even recently just replayed it. And it's still good. So go check that out. If there's anything you go check out on this list, make Florence one of those things. I really, really liked it. Shadow of the Colossus remake. This is something I'm pretty sure a lot of people forgot even happened this year. I thought it was a really good remake of Shadow of the Colossus. That's really all there is to say about it. If you've never played Shadow of the Colossus before, I highly recommend doing it. A lot of people will say like, oh, but they changed the art on this thing and that, and like, who gives a fuck? Like, this is a really great version of the game, and it's on PS4, and I think it's like budget price. You can probably get it for $30 at this point, maybe even 20, because I think it launched at 40. I don't know if that's right. But yeah, go play it. It's good. It's Shadow of the Colossus. Literally, that's it. So, Rust left early access this year. I didn't play it right when it left early access, but in the summertime, me and a friend, we really delved into what Rust is now, and like we played when it came out in early access, and then we played this year. And seeing like what that thing became, like they switched engines, they made so many changes, like I couldn't even list them all. It just it's something really special. It's this survival game that came out around the same time DayZ did, and it left early access somehow before DayZ did. And ultimately, it's like a way better game than DayZ ever has been, but I try to not be so negative about those kind of things. Go play Rust. It's good now. Warhammer Vermintide 2, another thing that's like, hey, I really like this thing. It's Left 4 Dead with loot drops. Then we come to Sea of Thieves, which is a game that I wish I loved. There are a few of those on here. Sea of Thieves is the first one of those this year, really, though. It's got a really great foundation, but I haven't played it, so I can't speak to what they've done post-release. But what I did play at launch was just like not really substantial enough to keep me invested for longer than literally the first night of playing, pretty much. I saw almost all the content there is. Like, I saw what that game was, and I was like, I am good. I know some people who played a lot of it, still play a lot of it, but for me, I am not a fan. Really pretty, though. Really pretty water. Far Cry 5 is another game that I wish I would have loved. Not for lack of it being not the game I wanted. I think like I might have some of that with Sea of Thieves, just because I had different expectations, I think, about what Sea of Thieves was and what it was going to be. But Far Cry 5, for all intents and purposes, don't ever fuck that up. I will kill you. I will have you killed. For all intents and purposes, was this sort of, it was more Far Cry, and I love Far Cry 3, and I love Far Cry 4, and I was like, yeah, more Far Cry, hell yeah. And I was just kind of like soured by like, oh, I guess this is just more Far Cry, and like that's literally what I asked for, but ultimately I don't think it was what I wanted. And also, in the world that we live in today, especially in America, like making a game about a Christian pseudo kind of right-wingy thing and being like staunchly, this game is not political. We are not making a political statement at all. Like that's a choice for sure.
I would never become a politics YouTuber.
And I don't know if you've seen the ending of that game, but it goes places and doesn't really do anything with its setting or the conceit of the story that it's set up. And ultimately I think it was just left sort of boring. Like there's stuff to be said about like what Far Cry 3 is. Like you're this white dude running around getting tribal tattoos and using like there's a whole lot to unpack there, I think. But ultimately what Far Cry 5 does is staunchly be uninteresting in its approach to its story and characters and setting. And I think that's really disappointing. So yeah, Far Cry 5 I think is a fine game, but ultimately was pretty disappointing. Donut County on PS4 was pretty fantastic. I keep saying fantastic a lot in this video, and I'm going to keep saying it. I think it's like a vocal tick of mine. I don't really know. Anyways, Donut County. I really liked it. It's super funny, super fun. It's like Katamari meets Tremors. I don't know if that's the best way to sell that thing, but I'm getting a little bit tired, and we got a ways to go. Destiny 2 Warmind. If I did talk about, I don't think I made a video for like the last half of 2017's games, but Destiny 2 took over my life and my friends' lives at the latter half of 2017, and you know, Warmind was more Destiny 2 in the sense that it continued a lot of what the launch version of Destiny 2 was. It was a much better expansion than Curse of Osiris, which was devoid of content and I think was a straight up bad piece of media. But Warmind was really great, I think. But we're going to talk about good Destiny 2 stuff. We'll talk about that towards the end of this video. State of Decay 2, sequel to State of Decay, a game I really liked. Ultimately, completely uninteresting. I played it for like 2 days and I forgot about it. It looked like it was fine, but it wasn't for me, I guess. So another game I wish I would have really liked, but ultimately didn't. Dark Souls Remastered came out this year on PC and PS4 and stuff. I'm going to talk about the PC version specifically right now. Dark Souls is a perfect video game. There's nothing really for me to be said about what Dark Souls is, but I did play through Dark Souls again when Remastered came out on PC, and it's some of the most fun I had all year with a video game, honestly. I mean, it's Dark Souls. What more is there to say? I spent a lot of time really enjoying my time back in the world of Dark Souls and just like playing that game again. And especially playing it with friends who had never played it before, and being like, hey, here's a version for PC that, while it has some issues with the textures and the lighting, like I don't give a fuck. While it has some of those issues and changes and stuff, ultimately it's Dark Souls, and people who didn't get to play it before got to play a version of the PC they didn't have to mod. So it was really great for getting friends into it, and I had a lot of fun with that. Detroit Become Human was a game that I didn't like because I don't really like any David Cage games. A lot of people were talking about it, but I felt like I should just say here, I played it, and I think that you can do a lot of those analogies a whole lot better. And another game developer saying, my game's apolitical, sucks, especially David Cage. So, take a nap, David. Captain Toad came out for Switch, and I'm a huge proponent of put everything on Switch. That's all I have to say. Captain Toad's a masterpiece, and it's on Switch now. Go play it. Yakuza 0, another game that got ported from last year, which was a year that I thought was like banger after banger after banger. Yakuza 0 is one of the first bangers of that year, and I think everyone should play it now. There's like literally no excuse. It's on PC. It's on console. Go play it. It's fantastic. Monster Hunter World came to PC, also another port. It's Monster Hunter World, but running at uncapped frame rates. And so that was the version I played the most of. And it's got quicker load times, uncapped frame rates, beautiful graphics, and my friends could play it with me. So, great. Go play Monster Hunter World. I talked about it earlier a little bit. I really recommend it. World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth. That's right, kids. I played WoW again this year. Unfortunately, I only leveled a character to max and then quit. But one of the upsides is that it's some of the best leveling I've ever seen in a World of Warcraft game. I really, really enjoyed it. So there's that. I thought it was like totally fantastic and awesome, and it's one of the first WoW expansions I've ever actually consciously gone through and been like, I'm going to do literally every quest because every quest is fantastically written and is fun to do, and I love it. Which makes it unfortunate to hear that like the end game stuff is like not great this time, and like worse than Warlords of Draenor, and if you've played WoW, you know what that statement means, and that's pretty fucking wild. So yeah. I really enjoyed my time with Battle for Azeroth. If you've played WoW before, maybe give it a shot and level a character. It's really great. Shenmue 1 and 2 got remastered and came out. I hate Shenmue, mainly because they are games that make things tedious in sake of realism. And I think doing that in a video game is a quick way to make me hate the video game. I think video games that are like intentionally obtuse and like slow and boring because that's how real life is, suck. I want you to remember that opinion. I want you to remember that. That's gonna be very important in a couple minutes here. Then The Messenger was a game I played a little bit of, especially during PAX. Went to PAX this year, as I always do, and The Messenger was out, and that was the game I spent like my hotel room nights playing, was The Messenger, and I thought it was really fantastic. It's really well written, really funny. The shopkeeper character especially is like super great. And there's a couple really cool twists in there if you can play through and you can get to them. If you can, you will want to. I think that the base gameplay before even those two other twists come into play are like super great. So go check out The Messenger. I loved it. Yeah, go play The Messenger. Now let's take a look at some of the stuff that I have noted in my list here as the stuff I really liked. I think there's a dog barking outside. I don't know if you can hear him. I hope not. First up on that list is Dark Souls Remastered for the Switch. Yeah, I bought Dark Souls Remastered twice this year. Once on the PC, which is beautiful and fantastic on frame rate, blah, da, 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 da. On the Switch, it's a little ugly. The sound is pretty crunchy and bad, but it's on the Switch, and I'm a huge proponent of put everything on the Switch. And man, Dark Souls on Switch fucking sings, just like everything does on Switch. I played it over a holiday, something. I was away for some reason, and Dark Souls on Switch had come out, and man, I really blew through it. Like a good chunk of that game, just like laying in bed, and I had a great time with it. So yeah, Dark Souls on Switch, fantastic. Dead Cells, another game that's kind of like Dark Souls that's on Switch. Don't really recommend the Switch version for this one though. It's a great time to play it, but the ideal way to play this, much like Dark Souls, I guess, is on the PC or like on a console or something. Dead Cells is like a 2D Metroidvania-y kind of thing. It's like run-based, it's roguelite. You carry stuff over from runs. It's really fantastic. Super fast, super fluid, super weighty combat. I love it. It was in early access earlier this year, and it just like watching it grow was like really fantastic. And seeing the final version was it was a really, really great game. I think a game that deserves to be in conversations about like Game of the Year stuff, much like Celeste. Into the Breach is a game that I normally wouldn't be caught playing, not because I don't like these kinds of games, but because I'm terrible at them. It's like a strategy puzzle game, kind of like Final Fantasy Tactics in a way, but it almost like kind of treats movement and combat like chess, a game I actually don't know how to play. But each unit has like specific movement types and certain things they can do, and each battle is almost like a puzzle. Like there is a specific right way to play things, I think, with the setup you bring in, and knowing those moves is like really great. They even have like a rewind feature, like, oh, I did the wrong move, I'm gonna rewind, because there is like an optimal route for each battle, and it's really satisfying when you figure it out. Lumines came to Switch. If you don't know what Lumines is, that's Mizuguchi's, the guy who did Rez, his puzzle game that was out on PSP. He brought it to Switch, and it's fucking fantastic. So that's about it. Bring everything to Switch. Lumines rules. Be awesome if they gave him another puzzle game. One game that I didn't really expect to like fall in love with was Pokemon Let's Go. Eevee, not Pikachu. The Pikachu version is for cops, let's be clear about that. But Let's Go Eevee was like this. I was like, oh man, the catching looks boring. It looks like Pokemon for babies. I want nothing to do with this. But I gave it a shot. And surprisingly, it's pretty much just a normal Pokemon game. It's kind of just a remake of the original. It's a remake of Yellow, but you know, it's just a remake of those Pokemon games, and it's really great. I really like it. I'm still playing through it. I have a great time with it. The catching stuff isn't really that big a deal. Like, at its core, ultimately, it is still just Pokemon. So, yeah. All right. That's it for like all the stuff that I went through a list, and I was like, oh, what did I like this year? And just sort of like put stuff on there. That's sort of it. So now, well, my mic is on that. Now, let's get into the real shit. So, if you're at all conscious of like video games right now, you're probably aware of the fact that there are a few things I didn't mention in this supposed game of the year, these are my favorite games thing video. Those three things being, Spider-Man, God of War, and Red Dead Redemption 2. That's because this year with video games, I talked about stuff earlier. I talked about a lot of games that I was into. But if you notice, some of them were ports or were things for other games that had already come out in 2017. Like I said, like Dark Souls was the most fun I had with a game this year. And that's because this is the first year in a long time that almost all of the big AAA stuff that's come out, I haven't really connected with on any level. Like, I think some of these games are very good, yes, but I find myself struggling to play through them. Playing through them feels like a chore. Even stuff that I should like in theory, like Far Cry 5 or something, I just find it difficult to play, to find time to play. Not even to find time to play, but just to sit down and actually make the time to do it. So I guess we'll start with talking about Spider-Man. Spider-Man is my favorite of these big AAA blockbuster juggernauts, mainly because I have like a huge emotional, value for Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. I have a huge emotional, attachment to Spider-Man, huge emotional connection. Like, and of course I do. Like, being the kind of person that I am, of course Spider-Man would speak to me the most out of almost all the superheroes, right? And like, I have such a crazy emotional attachment for Spider-Man that like I even like 100% of the Amazing Spider-Man, like Andrew Garfield games. Like, I will play any Spider-Man thing you throw at me for an inexorbitant amount of time just because it's Spider-Man. But the good thing about this one is that it's the best one. It's better than the one that you liked on the PS2. It's really, really fantastic. Especially the swinging around, it's really, really good. It feels good. And yeah, you can talk about game feel in a review. If you think talking about how a game feels in a review is like wrong or something, you're fucking stupid. I thought the story for Spider-Man though was pretty serviceable at best. I really like a lot of the stuff they did with the characters. I think that starting the story where it is in Peter's life, him and Mary Jane having broken up, having already been together and broken up at this point. I think making Mary Jane, a reporter gives her like some much needed agency. I think that making Peter not a reporter like is an interesting choice. I think that the stuff they even did with his relationship with Otto, his relationship with his Aunt May's role in the story, I feel like all of these things are really, really great. And even like what they do with Miles Morales is like really fantastic. I think that the third act of the game is definitely the strongest point for it, like story-wise. I think that emotionally it understands what Spider-Man is, and it really plays to all of the possible like beats that you could want it to play to. it tackles every single fan servicey sort of moment that you would want from a Spider-Man game. You know, they probably knew that this game would be successful and that they would get a sequel just based alone on how it feels to swing. But you know, they really are like, okay, this is our Spider-Man game. If we don't get another shot at this, we've got to take these chances now. And they take them, and they, for the most part, it lands. But I think that outside of that third act, that some of the story kind of meanders a little bit, and you know, but otherwise, I think it's a really well-written Spider-Man story. Not the best Spider-Man story, but I think it's well done. And I think what they do with the characters is really, really great. The rest of the gameplay, though, on the other hand, like the not swinging stuff and the not cutscene stuff, I think is just okay at best, really. Like, the combat is fine. It's not even, like, Batman level good. It tries to do some Arkham stuff, and it tries to differentiate stuff from the Arkham, you know, formula where you're zipping around punching dudes. You're still doing that here, but there's a real focus on getting them up into the air and performing, like, aerial combos, which I think is a really neat system, but for the most part, I think the combat is pretty mediocre at best. Not mediocre, it's good, it's serviceable, it's fine. But I would much rather be swinging than fighting in that game, right? And there are some like suit power-ups that make a lot of combat like totally trivial, like Web Blossom, for example. You just walk in and you just like literally web every single dude in the room, so it doesn't really matter all that much. And then getting 100% in the game is pretty easy. I don't think that's a fault of the game, but I do think that getting it and it being easy is like totally fine. In fact, I value that. I got the platinum for it. I don't have a lot of platinum trophies. And so in a game that I can 100% and platinum with my schedule and stuff like that, I think that's really great and I appreciate that. But actually doing it felt like busy work in the end. Like most of the side stuff isn't that fun or interesting in any way. Some of it's downright laborious, like the secret photos, the normal photo ops even. But then especially like the random crimes and stuff like that just sucks in the end, having to just sit around on rooftops. Oh, but it makes you feel like Spider-Man. Yeah, but it's the bad part of feeling like Spider-Man, right? So I came out of Spider-Man just sort of going, that was a pretty okay story in a game with really great traversal, which makes sense considering this is Insomniac and they did, you know, Sunset Overdrive before this. Which, by the way, hey, Sunset Overdrive came to PC like last week or whatever. Go play that too. Anyways, yeah, like, you know, people would just be gushing over this game like, this is my favorite game of all time and stuff like that. And I don't know if I really see that in this. I think it's a pretty okay game. I think it's a fine game that's going to have a really, really great sequel. And that's not a detriment. That's not a derogatory way of saying that. I just think that there's a great foundation here and it's going to be built upon. But for what it is right now, God of War. Another beautiful, well-made PS4 exclusive. Like, they're killing it this year. These games are selling like hotcakes. They're single player, which I love. And yeah, you know, these are very good games, but I'm not connecting with them. God of War. You know, there's a lot of really great strides being made here. Also on the character front. I don't know if I would say the storytelling front. I thought that Spider-Man actually had a pretty okay story, right? Like, I was invested in the story with Spider-Man, but God of War just, I don't know. I don't even hardly remember the plot points of God of War. I remember a few pretty choice moments, but other than that, like, it's fine. It's an okay story, but the character stuff in God of War is actually really interesting. Like, out of everything that I got out of God of War, that's what I'll take away the most. Like, Cory Barlog, the director of this game, I know he didn't do everything, but, you know, him and his team at Sony Santa Monica, like, they made Kratos into an actual character who isn't just like, oh, scream and, you know, punching people. Like, he's an actual character with actual needs and wants and goals, and I think that's super awesome. And I think the opening of the game plays off of, like, Kratos' past and plays off of, like, Kratos being who he is now in this game in some really interesting ways. And the game does flirt with that a little bit. And in the moments that it does reference Kratos' past and makes him sort of atone for the things he's done. That's the interesting stuff in God of War. But when it's Kratos and Atreus walking up a mountain and doing all that stuff, I'm like, it's fine. That's just okay. Now the combat in God of War is much better than the combat in Spider-Man. It has combos, and Spider-Man has combos, but God of War has like really interesting ways to play about with like the different weapons that you get and stuff like that. But ultimately, I just found myself like throwing the axe at a dude and then calling it back, and then throwing the axe and then calling it back. And like you could say that's my fault for like just playing the game in a boring way. But other character action games like Bayonetta, and I get that comparing God of War to Bayonetta is not fair in any stretch of the imagination. But, other character action games won't allow you to just sort of like spam and play in a boring way. They require you to experiment and require you to make really, really fun choices. And even like novice players in Bayonetta, I think, can do something like stylish and fun, or like Devil May Cry can do something stylish and fun. But in God of War, I just threw an axe at a dude and called it back for like 20 hours, right? God of War also does the thing that every AAA game now does, and it's an open world RPG for some reason. This was one of the things that really I did not even like remotely connect with in God of War. It was like, I don't think the world is necessarily interesting to explore. It is super well made, super detailed. Like, there is an extreme level of craftsmanship that went into making the world of God of War, but ultimately it wasn't fun or interesting to explore or traverse. So I was not in any way enticed to see the rest of it. And then the stuff I did like seek out and go see, like was whatever. It would be like a ghost being like, go find my mom's bones or whatever, right? Or a dwarf dude being like, oh, you want to make a weapon? And I'm like, well, not really. I mean, I'm done with the story. I don't really need any more gear. I'm fine. And like the Valkyrie fights were whatever. Like I didn't think that the combat was like, I didn't think it was tight enough. Like something like Dark Souls. Like I hate being a video game guy that compares things to Dark Souls, but God of War has a control scheme that's just like literally lifted from Dark Souls. So the comparison is apt. And like the Valkyrie fights didn't blocking an attack in God of War does not feel anywhere near as like controllable or sustainable as it does in Dark Souls. I didn't feel like I was in control for some portions of God of War's combat, when in Dark Souls every mistake you make is like your fault. But in God of War, I feel like, especially in the Valkyrie fights with these big swinging hitboxes and these very thin like blades, wings being swung at you, like I didn't feel like I was necessarily making all of the decisions as far as like I'm getting hit now. Like my mistakes didn't always feel like my mistakes in those things. It was sort of overwhelming. Again, like I can see why people really love God of War. I can see it, but I don't really get it. I wish I loved God of War the way that a lot of people seem to love God of War, but I thought it was fine. I thought they did interesting stuff with Kratos, and that was about it. I didn't really want to play any more past the end credits, That's not to say that these games aren't like total masterpieces and triumphs of creation, but which they are, but I don't know. And like speaking of triumphs of creation, the third game, Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah. Hey, you're okay, girl. Go to hell.
It really sucks to say, but I think I just plain don't like that game. It's not even that I didn't connect with it. It's that like playing it feels like a chore. I mentioned this when I talked about Shenmue earlier, but games that make things tedious and boring for the sake of making them tedious and boring because that's how it is in real life. That's not a great excuse, I don't think. And it really turns me off of the game. I would say I made some progress in the story. I'd say I'm probably about a third of the way through the thing, but I can't keep playing it. Every time I play it, I'll do a couple missions, but I'm just so bored out of my mind that I can't play it. I want to see how this thing ends. I've heard from people who have finished it where this thing goes and what the end state of that game is, and I really want to see that for myself, but man, playing it is a chore. I feel like I'm repeating myself when I say that, but like it's seriously the only way I can think of to describe it. Even like the side stuff I don't find interesting at all. Like hunting is like a 17-step process. Like you have to get off your horse, you have to look for tracks, stink lines, whatever, shoot the animal, skin the animal, take the hide, back to your horse, get on the horse, go to the trader. Like in Red Dead Redemption 1, you would skin an animal, it would go into your inventory, and you would sell it at your leisure. You wouldn't have to like go through this whole rigmarole of like working a job, essentially. I'm playing a video game. I don't want to do this. I don't want to bathe Arthur. I don't want to feed Arthur. I don't want to shave Arthur. I don't like this stuff sucks. I don't want to care for the camp. I don't want to do any of that stuff. I want to have fun in a Rockstar game. And I think that the thesis of this game is ultimately like the Wild West is tough and this is what it was like. And like that's a fine thing. But I don't know. I like back to the side stuff. The reason I haven't done a lot of the side stuff is because I think that movement, even controlling the character in that game, is so like slow and tedious. Like even compared to other Rockstar games, I get like this is their thing with their engine that their characters don't control great, but I feel like they cranked it up on purpose for this game. Like it moving feels so bad to me, and moving and shooting, that even the thought of doing the side stuff, the non-mandatory stuff, is like totally, I have a total aversion to it, and I don't want anything to do with it. I want to see how Red Dead ends. I really do. Red Dead Redemption 1, I think, is one of the best games ever made. I think it's Rockstar's best game, definitely, and I was totally excited for Red Dead 2, but seeing what it is, like, I don't know if I can finish it, and that bums me out. I'm a huge proponent of making your game and your art like what you want it to be, not necessarily making it to appeal to anybody else. If nobody else likes it, that's totally fine. And that's not my issue with Red Dead 2. My issue is with like some of these games in general. Like a lot of stuff I just didn't connect with this year, and I don't know what that says about me. Like people who would normally like the same stuff I do really love some of these games, and I was just felt sort of ambivalent to them. And I don't know whether or not that's indicative of the quality of these things, or my changing tastes, or just me sort of falling out with games this year. I don't know. You know, it's something I've been thinking a lot about as a new release keeps coming out and coming out and coming out. It's like, what does that mean for me? Who am I? You know, like I know that seems like so weirdly existential, but these are things in theory that I should love, especially something like Spider-Man. But ultimately, I just was sort of lukewarm on it at best. You know, like 2018 for me has been a pretty big year of growth, and I'm wondering whether or not some of this stuff is like the stuff that makes me who I am now, or whether or not it was the stuff that made me who I used to be. And it's difficult to see where those lines, you know, fall. But yeah, it's ultimately pretty disappointing for me that I don't love these games. Two games that I really did love this year, like that I would probably put as my 1 and 2 as my top 10 game of the year stuff, right? Like Destiny 2 Forsaken.
Now I gotta step on this.
Yay.
Whoa. Oh, what? There you go.
I mentioned earlier with Warmind that we talk about Destiny 2 later. Destiny 2 Forsaken like took everything that everybody disliked about Destiny 2, fixed it, much like Taken King did with Destiny 1. So, I mean, whether or not you think this is like, okay, business practice is like up to you. But it was a game that took over my life near the end of 2017, and a game that continued to take over my life. Like, so there was stuff I connected with. It was just a game from last year. I think that the leveling in Destiny 2 Forsaken was like super fantastic. I think the new zone was amazing. I thought the story was really great. I thought the tone was an awesome direction to take. I think that Destiny 2 is now on like a really great track to keep moving forward. And if they continue this upward trajectory, like I don't see how they can fail. The Dreaming City, for example, the endgame zone is something straight out of the best stuff of WoW. It is something you would only think to see in like real big MMOs. And to see that in Destiny, to see that level of detail and care going into like endgame content was refreshing. From a storytelling standpoint, seeing them contextualize weekly resets within the lore of the thing was like mind-blowing to me. I will never forget like the first reset after the curse. And like people who don't play Destiny, I guess that's a little tough for you to parse that sentence, but it's really great, the writing they're doing. And it's still continuing. Like this expansion came out in September and we're still seeing new writing and new story every week leading up to the new expansion, which is out in a week. Not even a week, in like 3 days. So yeah, I loved Destiny 2 Forsaken. Oh, he doesn't like Red Dead, but he loves Destiny 2. Ooh. Right, like I can already hear it. I can see those comments in my head, but fuck them. And weirdly enough, the game that I've been looking forward to the most all year, and the game that I've connected with the most this year is Tetris Effect. They gave Misaguchi another puzzle game, like I mentioned earlier with Lumines, and they gave him Tetris, which is the best puzzle game, maybe the best game. They gave him Tetris and he made the best one. In my 2017 video last year, I talked about how Puyo Puyo Tetris was a banger because it was a good version of Tetris on the Switch. Well, this is a good version of Tetris in VR with amazing psychedelic graphics and fantastic soundtracks. Pretty much the good stuff from Lumines. But for Tetris. And, you know, I don't know how much there is to say about Tetris, but I will say that this is a Tetris game that gave me an emotional reaction. Like it made me emotional in a way that I didn't feel about any other games really this year, and Tetris pulled that off. You know, since its announcement at E3, I felt something special about this game. I felt like a kindred connection with this game, and it's really good to know that it came out well. And not just well, it came out fantastic. I think Tetris Effect is like a perfect game. So, yeah. Thanks for watching this very long thing if you stuck through it. If not, I totally get it. I just needed to exercise some opinion demons. And I've got a lot more thinking to do, I think, about me and video games and media in general and my general connection to them. Yeah. Like I said, I make a show somewhere else. There's a link somewhere. I don't know if it's on screen or in the description, but it's somewhere. It's a fun movie show. I don't just make it. I make it with a group of awesome people, and we do it every other week, and it's really, really cool and fun to do. So if you want to see more of me, you can see me over there. I don't know when I'll make another video. You know, I am how I am. I just have to talk about things sometimes, which is whatever. So, yeah. Thanks for watching. I gotta go to bed.